Oh goodness, not the up marriage montage. They are just so happy and optimistic, hardworking and loving. But of course, it wasn't all happiness. After being married, Carl and Ellie Fredrickson learned they were unable to have a child, and this left them devastated. But of course, they got through it together. They decided to look to the future with a new dream of voyaging to Paradise Falls in South America. But something I have always wondered is why they ended their pursuit to become parents. Why didn't they adopt? Hello, I'm Isaac from What's Up Videos, where we discuss normally fun topics, but today it's kind of serious for fun people, and today I'm going to theorize on why Ellie and Carl didn't adopt. If you'd like to learn more about Carl and Ellie, I've provided all of the links to the movies and the resources I used in the description. And to continue discussing Pixar with me, make sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There are a plethora of circumstances that determine whether it is the right time to have a child that I sure don't know about, so we can't just say, Carl and Ellie just adopt. What's the big deal? You want a kid, so go get a kid. Because that's totally what I felt when I first heard of this question. I just wanted the characters to be happy, and of course adoption was an option for them, but it's never as simple as just making the decision to adopt. We can never be for sure why they made their decision, but if we go in empathizing with their situation, when we examine their lives and the adoption process, we can attempt to come up with an answer for why they didn't pursue adoption. When Carl and Ellie heard the news they could not have children, there are two options for how they came to deciding not to adopt. Either they wanted to adopt and couldn't, or they were not interested in pursuing that means of attaining a child to raise. Maybe they didn't want to go through with raising a child that wasn't their own. Does this make sense for the characters? No, I'd say not at all. Does it make sense with the time period? A little. When Carl is an elderly man, he is 78, and if the film takes place in 2009, when it was released, well then he was born around 1931. This means if he got married even at 18, Ellie and Carl were thinking about having children in the 1950s. At this point in history, the state Minnesota had just set a precedent for mandating social investigations of all adoptions in 1917, meaning adoptive parents had to show they were fit to adopt a child, and adoption agencies began to provide confidential adoption records. The rationale for the inconspicuous nature of the adoption documents, which became more popular in the decades leading up to the 1950s, was guided by the belief the adoptee, birth family, and adoptive family members should be protected by the stigma of the pregnancy. There were just a lot of negative thoughts and connotations with adoption at the time, which have since been significantly squelched. So yes, this thought process that they wouldn't want a child that wasn't their own could make sense when they were alive, but this contradicts who these characters are. If they didn't want to adopt a child because of the social pressure surrounding them, that would imply they were willing to bend to society's norms and shaped their dreams off of the aspirations of another, while in actuality, they lived their lives independently of the world. Their seemingly unrealistic dreams of South America did not fit into any trend going on, contradicting the notion stigma shaped who they were. Ellie especially was a confident woman who would speak her mind.
What are you doing? Do you think you got what it takes? Well, do you? Where you'll take us? Cross your heart. Adventure is up there. I like you.
Stigmas about raising an illegitimate child would not bother her. Ellie and Carl are the last people who care what anyone thinks, and they are truly some of the most humble, non-greedy, and kind characters in all of Pixar. I know adoption and giving birth to a child are different circumstances for sure, but it's difficult for me to believe these characters would not pursue this route because of how they would be viewed. Ellie and Carl always seemed to pursue their dreams to the fullest extent and loved each other through and through. In my mind, I feel like if they wanted the adventure of raising a child, they would have done everything they could to accomplish that goal. I mean, we saw them renovating that decrepit house into a dream home, which sounds super intimidating to me because I'm like the least handy person. And we saw how they saved their whole lives to get to Paradise Falls. Why would having a child be any different? I'm not saying every individual or couple who is infertile should pursue adoption. I think it's very possible after this couple found out they couldn't have a baby of their own, they just didn't even consider adopting. They maybe could have had no problem with adoption, but just didn't feel like it was something they were interested in. And I think that is a very fair idea. Adopting a child is not for everyone, but I don't know. Personally, I just think adoption seems like something this couple would be excited about pursuing. Carl and Ellie seem like they would have been willing to push away any stigma of the day around adoption and were ready to give their love to another person. But regardless of whether they were all for adopting a child or if they never considered it, I think something was stopping them from adopting. The best word I can use that describes why they couldn't pursue adoption is strain, specifically emotional and financial strain. Not only was the couple emotionally strained from learning they couldn't have children of their own, but they also seemed to have a miscarriage on the way. We see Ellie and Carl madly in love with the idea of having a child, and suddenly we see them painting and furnishing a nursery within their home, which normally occurs once a couple knows they are expecting. Of course, Ellie is by no means your average by-the-book girl, and I think she could have easily plunged into creating the perfect bedroom for her unborn child, so it is possible she was never pregnant, but if she was, it would add another level of heartbreak to the scene with the doctor. After all of this loss, the couple just didn't feel prepared to go through the long bureaucratic procedures that can come from adopting after so much resistance in their pursuit thus far. Maybe they couldn't bear fighting for their dream any longer, but there wasn't just an emotional toll that was building up in their lives. Carl and Ellie were also strained financially. They weren't particularly well off. They had their jobs, put in their time, but struggled to make ends meet when anything came up, seen through them constantly pulling from their Paradise Falls funds for help. And once again, they bought one house their whole life that was decrepit and built it with like no money. Like, I know that's possible, but it blows my mind. In addition to not having much to begin with, the medical bills they must have built up from fertility treatments and tests would have been straining on their own, much less the expenses tied to adoption. Plus, if an adoption agency knew they didn't have economic stability, an adoption investigation, the one that was originally done by Minnesota, could have resulted in them being labeled not fit to have a child. I think it is great adoption agencies look into the parents who want to adopt children, since those thorough procedures ensure children are safe. But for Carl and Ellie, it was another roadblock they weren't confident they could overcome. So what am I trying to say here? The decision to adopt a child or not is complicated, multi-layered, and differs from situation to situation. During the time Carl and Ellie could have looked to adopt, there was negative connotations with adoption, but I don't think that affected their decision because they were free-thinking individuals. They may have just not wanted to look into adoption and felt it wasn't right for them, but these two don't seem like the ones to give up on something they dream of doing. I think the pairing of a great deal of emotional and financial strain left them feeling they could no longer pursue the dream of becoming parents. But of course, they got through it together. They decided to look to the future with a new dream of voyaging to Paradise Falls, supported each other every day, and kept their soulmate in their hearts. Why is Up so sad? If you made it through discussing one of the saddest moments in a Pixar film and enjoyed theorizing on Ellie and Carl's relationship, then click that like button. And if you are interested in staying up to date with more Up videos, then click that subscribe button and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So now it's time for the question of the day, sponsored by my patrons. Why do you think Carl and Ellie didn't adopt? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, along with any other ideas you have for future Discovering Disney episodes. If you'd like to see more What's Up videos, then check out some awesome pics over here. And as always, thanks for watching and have a magical day.